Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee. My name is Melanie Hunt, and I'm chair of the committee. I'm delighted to welcome members to the committee today, and especially Sarah Thompson, our board apprentice, who's sitting up next to Stephen there, Janice from our legal team, Janice Austin, and Mark Milling as well from Lancing College. I'd also like to note that this is, or will be, Nigel Manville's last meeting with us before he retires. I'd just like to thank you, Nigel, very much for all the work that you've put in to supporting the committee, producing really excellent detailed papers. And oh, it's back. Goodness me. I do apologise. It's not me. I do apologise. Right, anyway, Nigel's last meeting. Thank you very much, and we all wish you well for the future. Thanks very much. Right, I just need to remind all members that all members have a primary responsibility for ensuring that the authority furthers the national park purposes and duty, that we regard ourselves first and foremost as members of the authority and will act in the best interests of the authority and of the park, rather than as representatives of any interest groups. To minimise disruption, could I ask you please to switch your phones to silent? And if you need to leave the meeting during proceedings, could you just sneak out through the exits? I do intend that we'll take a break this morning and a break at lunchtime today. So I'll judge when, depending on how the meeting's going. Can I please remind members to speak clearly and directly into the microphone, bringing the microphone forward if necessary, as indicated here. And please turn your microphone off when you've finished speaking. Thank you. Right, so item 1, apologies for absence. Richard.
We've received apologies from Vicky Wells, Mark Fairweather and Maurice Findlay. Thanks very much, Richard. Thank you. And just to say that we continue to send our best wishes to Maurice Findlay, who is still unwell. Item number 2, declaration of interests. Does any member wish to disclose an interest and for which item? Stephen.
Yes, thank you. Item 9, a personal and pecuniary interest. My eldest son went to the school. My youngest son is still a pupil at the school, and I'm regularly instructed by the planning consultants in my day job who have helped with the preparation of the plan. So I will leave the meeting for that item.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Stephen. Any other declarations from any other colleagues? No? Okay, thank you. Item 3, the minutes of the previous Policy and Resources Committee on 21st of November. As ever, I will take these page by page, and if you could indicate, please, if you have any amendments or items that you wish to raise. So, page 1, page 2, page 3. Jerry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there are just a couple of points I wanted to make on the, in fact, it's page 3 and 5, just points of clarification. Richard, do you want to talk through the detail?
Yes. Hi, thanks, Jerry. Yes, very happy to. So there's a couple of proposed amendments which Jerry's put forward on paragraph 384. It's bullet point 4. It's proposed to amend the second sentence to read, the SDNPA retained its powers in relation to TROs for boats and other unsealed highways. However, the authority at its meeting in October 2022 had chosen to work in partnership with HCC on the management of boats and not to exercise those powers itself. So that's the first one. The second one is paragraph 385, bullet point 10. And it's the deletion of the first sentence that says it was not within the gift of the SDNPA to close the splash route as that power remained with HCC. And then it's the addition of wording to say HCC were not proposing to use a TRO to close the splash route. And then an additional sentence following that say the SDNPA retained its own powers to make a TRO to do so should it choose to do so. And then bullet point 16, it's an amendment to remove the wording current evidence available indicated and to say instead the authority's understanding was. Those are the three amendments.
Okay, thank you very much.
I was
Jerry?
just going to say that last one, that was part of the point of the discussion, actually, that Hampshire have not disclosed what evidence they have. So that is just to make that clear.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. Yes, I recall we had information on the usage of the splash route, but not about the impact of the use of it. So thank you. Okay, do we need to take a vote on those amendments or not?
Do you want to check if there's any others?
We'll just, yeah, I'll check and then we do the whole lot. Thank you, Richard. Okay, so moving through then, I should have used the page numbers as per here, shouldn't I? So page 8, I had one minor spelling mistake on para 385, second bullet, last sentence, if the code was continually breached. I think breached should be an EA. All people are nodding, wonderful. Page 9, page 10, page 11, 12. Tim.
I wasn't sure what was meant by 399. Traditionally, Section 106 funds always had a return period. That sounds like planners' jargon. And I wasn't sure what return period was. I don't know if that could be clarified. I'm sorry, I can't offer an amendment simply because I'm not sure what point is being made.
Yeah. I think I know what it was. Yeah, I think I know what this was. I think this was in relation to us asking about the use of Section 106 funds and whether there's a period within which we expect the work to have commenced before the funds have to be returned. Is that, I'm looking at Tim. Yeah, Tim's nodding. Hurrah. Oh, two lots of things right. That's good. Yes.
Is rather similar. Right at the bottom of the page, members were advised, second bullet, this is paragraph 407, sales were between 10 and 15%. 10 and 15% of what? Was my question.
Thank you.
Yes.
Richard.
Yes, so if you look at minute 406, there's a question there that it was noted that excellent sales in the visitor centre were exceeding expectations, and it was asked what sort of percentage was that, and I think sales were between 10 and 15%, so that's 10 and 15% over expectations.
Right. So maybe a slight amendment to the bullet. Yeah, thank you. Right, page 14. Yes, Stephen. Oh, sorry.
It says under 403 that a briefing note will be circulated to members about HLT1. I don't think we've seen that.
You're quite correct, Stephen. No, I don't think we have received it. I think this was a paper that Tim referred to that you may have been supplied as vice chair, as briefing for something else. And it was, I think Tim mentioned it in the meeting, and we all said that would be a useful document for us to have. So it was the briefing about baseline for HLT1. Sorry, I should say for Sarah, that's higher level target 1. and that's in our corporate plan.
Chair, sorry, still on page 13, if I may.
Yes.
It's in the same vein as your breaches one, but it's equally valid, I think. 403, second bullet point, line 3. In this jurisdiction, programmes is double MES.
Thank you. Oh, we're all pedantic today, aren't we? I love it. Okay, moving on. Thank you, Stephen. Page 14, 15, and that's it. Okay, so can I ask if... Oh, sorry, Kat.
Sorry, it's, I just need to go back to page 10, 389 paragraph, and then under number 2, Roman numeral 1, I just wondered, I noted that we're meant to have a report back within 4 months. That's obviously next month, but I wondered, I don't know when to raise, is that coming?
Absolutely. It is, and it's going to come up under one of the next items.
Okay, fine.
Laura's
Thank
going
you.
to do a report back
Very
for
well.
us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for picking that up. Thank you. Okay, now in terms of the amendments then that Richard and Jerry have worked on with regard to the debate on the splash route. Richard, are you happy? Or can everyone recall the amendments that Richard read? Or would you like him to read them again?
Read them again, please.
All right, okay.
So it was, this is item 9, minute 384, bullet point 4. The second sentence will now read, the SDNPA retained its powers in relation to TROs for boats and other unsealed highways. However, the authority at its meeting in October 2022 had chosen to work in partnership with HCC on the management of boats and to not exercise those powers itself. And then over a couple of pages, this is minute 385, bullet point 10. The first half of the bullet will minute will now read, HCC were not proposing to use a TRO to close the splash route. HCC would require evidence to make such a decision without serious risk of challenge. The SDNPA retained its own powers to make a TRO should it choose to do so. And then bullet point 16, instead of reading the current evidence available indicated, it will read instead, the authority's understanding was.
Thank you very much. Can I just, with a show of hands, see if you are in favour of those changes? Thank you very much. Thank you all. And then just to ask, are you happy that I sign the minutes with those changes as a correct record? Show of hands again, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so moving on. Item 4, updates on previous committee decisions, and is at this point that Kat's wish will be granted. And Laura's going to give us an update. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take you back to page 10 then of the minutes and point 2 that Kat very helpfully pointed out. This was the agreed actions that we were going to take forward, and they fall into 3 separate chunks, I suppose. So the first 2 were about us continuing to work with Hampshire County Council and the Trail Riders Fellowship and the Green Lane Association. Both of those things are absolutely in hand in that we're having ongoing conversations for all sorts of reasons that you will know only too well. Hampshire have got a lot going on at the moment, and so those conversations are difficult to take to fruition in terms of outputs and outcomes, but we're not giving up and we continue to have those conversations. We have a meeting coming up with the TRF to talk about some actions around developing a film together, and we'll be able to update you in the future. The middle one, I think, is probably the most crucial one for us. This is about picking up a piece of work to undertake some really good studies. So we have been talking with the Meon Valley Partnership. As some of you will know, we are commissioning 2 pieces of work to understand the state of the entire Meon. So we're going to go source to sea I'm going to work in partnership with the Wessex Rivers Trust, and we're going to get evidence around the health of the river, which I hope you will all find reassuring. It will be really helpful for us to then develop an evidence-based approach to delivering really solid work, really, going forward. So that's an important piece of work. It's taken some time to get to this point. There's been ongoing conversations, and partnership is often time-consuming, but it's the right way to do it, and we're excited about what will come out of that. And finally, the last 2 points, they're really to follow. So we can't really do anything at this stage because it wouldn't be a great use of resources, an appropriate use of resources to action kind of conversations around river flow and direction when we don't have the evidence to be able to make really sound decisions. So once we've got that evidence, we'll be able to direct our resources to making the best sort of decisions around what we do to take the Meon to a really good state in terms of health going forward.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Laura. Okay. Right, moving on then. Item 5, are there any urgent matters that have been notified? No, thank you. Item 6, I have been advised that there is no one from the public who would like to talk to us. Item 7, now we do have our pink papers, as I call them, our confidential Part 2 papers. When we get to the relevant point in the agenda, I will refer to those papers, and if anyone has any questions or comments on them, we'll then suspend the broadcast of the meeting and we'll deal with the issues at that point. Okay. Item 8, update from me. I just have 3 items to advise you of. The first one is that on occasion, I'm asked to, alongside Vanessa, to approve funding applications at short notice when they can't come to the committee by reason of deadlines and work that's required on them. And the funding team put in an application for an extension for the Ouse Valley Climate Action Project being held, which is in operation between Lewes and Newhaven and along the coast. A submission was put in at very short notice. Team worked really hard on it, and I'm pleased to say it was successful. So they now have funding for what's called a legacy year going forward, where there'll be a lot of work to make sure that the project leaves behind an important footprint and a lot of learning and materials that can be used to support climate action work in lots of other settings across the park. So that's really good news, but I think it's important that you know that these sort of things have to happen sometimes, out of committee. Second point is that following a workshop that we had on belonging, which was, I think, last November, a small group of members have been working on a draft action plan for the board, for members, to make sure that we do our bit, really, to contribute towards the authority's plans for equality, diversity and inclusion. And when we've got something firm, we will bring that to the MPA to approve. At the moment, Vanessa and Vicky and myself are working on it, supported by Laura. So that's just for your information. If anyone would like to contribute or get involved, do let me know. And finally, we have our committee away day on the 22nd of April. This is part of our requirement from the external auditors that we conduct a review of our performance annually. And we have done so now for the last 3 years. I'm really hope that you'll all be able to come along on 22nd of April. And if anyone has anything they'd particularly like to cover on that day, then again, please just let me know and we can build that into the agenda. So that's all from me on item 8. And I'm happy to move on now to item 9, which is the Lancing College Estate Whole Estate Plan. And I'm delighted to welcome our colleague from Lancing. Would you like to come and join us up here, Mark? Thank you, Mark. And Nick Heisman, of course, who you all know. Mr. Webb, amongst many other things. I know.
Please don't.
I'm
No,
sorry. I'm sorry, Nick.
no, that's fine. That's made me smile a lot. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to just give a chance for a bit of an overview of Lancing College Whole Estate Plan, but just a very quick reflection. It's 10 years since the South Downs National Park Authority adopted whole estate plans, and it's highly appropriate. This is the 10th WEP that is coming to us today for endorsement. The WEPs are a non-statutory document. They're still a progressive and almost unique approach by a local planning authority or any national park in the UK. So it's very much around looking to foster that good working relationship, often described as memorandums of understanding or memorandums of agreement. And they are something that I think the authority can be proud of, that they've still very relevant after 10 years. We're obviously adapting them, making sure that our work is relevant to the partnership management plan through the WEP process, but also DEFRA's protected landscape targets and outcome framework as well. The Lancing College engaged formally began the WEP process in November 2023 with officers. We have an inception meeting at the college, and the chapel of the college is in Lancing, is sometimes known by weary travellers on the A27 as the Hogwarts on the Hill, or certainly my children used to call that. But I have to say it's probably one of the most iconic buildings in the South Downs National Park and in southern England, being a Grade 1 building. It's the largest school chapel in the world, and Mark will talk to us more about this, and was consecrated by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and I think members on our visit had a chance to sort of look at the college, but also appreciate actually the scale of that building and what it does in terms of the landscape and the setting, particularly right on the edge of the national park, and setting that context. It was established in 1848. Lancing College was found on its current site in 1857. It's 158 hectares of size, so it has a lot of land surrounding it, not just the cultural heritage aspect, 11 hectares of scrub and woodland, chalk grassland, and educates 1,100 pupils and employs 335 staff, and it operates a number of land businesses, including equine, forestry and farming too. So going into the WEP, the vision is described as the big picture and what the estate wants to achieve. This is the key first element of the whole estate plan. And the Lancing College Estate's driving vision is, when considered in 2050, the Lancing College Estate will be widely recognised as a centre of excellence for education, an environmental leader, located in a heritage and natural-rich environments where a loving of learning is centred in the natural world and opportunities to meet society needs that derive from it. So that's the sort of vision that has been set out. This is the four elements that hold into are part of the whole estate plan. The asset audit is referred to in the WEP as the estate we know today provides a detailed insight in the estate of where the college currently sits. The asset audit is helpfully broken down into three elements, and these are heritage, natural capital, and sustainability. The ecosystem services analysis provides a comprehensive chapter which is around measuring our impact, and this section provides solid analysis into the ecosystem services and the economic outputs that the college generates. It's considered that Lancing College have demonstrated a comprehensive understanding and have articulated clearly the opportunities and constraints that the estate faces, and that all those three sections, the vision, the asset audit and eco-services analysis, has been undertaken. The action plan, the final part of the whole estate plan, cleverly breaks down into several project areas, one of them being natural capital enhancements, decarbonising our energy, which they've made a clear commitment to reducing carbon, campus improvements, diversifying the college enterprise and project, and importantly, connecting learners and community with nature and heritage. And each of these 5 projects offers a time frame and desired outcome and rationale, which is very key within that action plan. So it's a measurable, achievable
and realistic and targeted. So it is considered there's a clear link between the vision, the aims and objectives, and the analysis articulated in the Measuring Our Impact and chapter and the action plan of the Lancing College Whole Estate Plan. And it is our recommendation as officers for endorsement, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Nick. Mark, I'd like to invite you. Is there anything you'd like to say before we open up for questions?
Yes, please. I think I've been given 5 minutes, if that's all right.
Perfect. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'm going to read something so I get it all in. So.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So,
sorry, Mark. I'll just ask you to bring the microphone a little bit closer.
Yeah.
That's all.
I'm quite
broadcast.
loud. Can everyone hear me? Good. So the process of developing this whole estates plan has been really fascinating and thought-provoking, and I'd like to thank you all for your support and input throughout the process. I would like to share some thoughts on the challenges we face and the importance of us working together for the mutual benefit of the school and the park. Everything that the executive team and governors do in the short, medium and long term is for the holistic good of the whole school ecosystem, and it does need to be looked at as a whole. We're not just our pupils, we're not just our staff, we're not just our neighbourhood, we're not just our buildings, and we're not just our wider estate. We are all of these things, and each of these things at the same time. They all depend on each other in a complex dance. This WEP is a very important cog in the machine. It needs to work with our built estates plan, our community work, our route to net zero plan, our educational and co-curricular offering, our commercial income, and our care and stewardship of our listed buildings. It will also, of course, help us to support you in your aims for the National Park. There are very challenging times ahead. The independent school sector has very few friends at the moment. VAT has been imposed on fees, we have lost our charitable rates relief, and most schools have had to take a significant hit on fee income because we haven't been able to pass on all of this cost to parents who are already significantly struggling with affordability. We will also be hit by the impending national insurance increases. Schools like us look far wealthier than we actually are. At Lancing, we are custodians of some remarkable built and cultural heritage. We spend around £3.5 million a year on maintaining our rather eccentric buildings. We are ardent about the stewardship of our estate and in passing it on in a healthy state to the next generation. Our budget for next year is loss-making due to the VAT and recent national insurance increases. We are solid, we have healthy cash reserves, but the environment is hugely challenging and we will have to adapt to remain sustainable for the sake of all our stakeholders. Over our 3 schools and nursery, we educate over 1,200 pupils from 6 weeks old to 18 years old. We employ around 450 staff over many different job roles. We contribute over £40 million to the economy, roughly half of which is local. We must be allowed to remain competitive, and this does mean that we will need to invest in sensible and considered new facilities. The campus must continue to evolve. The loss of just 10 pupils to our competitors hits the bottom line by over £500,000. School operating margins are very fine indeed, particularly when you have buildings as challenging as ours. Our sports facilities, for instance, are way behind our local competitors, so we've recently asked for planning permission to put a cover on our smaller Astro. This new facility, which we so badly need, would be partly seen in the distance from the chapel and some other viewpoints, so the park planning officers and Historic England are recommending this for refusal. This typifies the challenges we face in operating a modern school in a competitive market within a high-value heritage environment. I am grateful that the National Park has now agreed that this planning application can go to committee so that it can be debated. In my view, the working relationship between the park and the college can only benefit from becoming closer with forums for face-to-face discussion. I very much hope that this WEP will be seen as part of this and demonstrates our intense desire to work with the park. To that end, we have made contact with your planning policy team and will be fully engaging in the current review of the local plan. For many years, we've been investing in the land, and we will continue to do so. We're in the mid-level stewardship scheme, We have planted 21,000 trees in recent years, including disease-resistant elms. We have recently dedicated an extra 50 acres to species-rich grassland. Our environmental consultant notes an enhancement in flora, insect and mammalian activity across the estate. We want to be a poster site for our nature and green credentials, to be exemplar both in looking after our estate on a micro level and the macro impact that we have on the planet. What a magnificent message this will give to our pupils who come from all across the world. We have 42 nationalities in the school, and we have pupils from all different backgrounds. For instance, we have 25 pupils at the moment on 110% bursaries. We are transforming pupils' lives. They are the next generation and will be part of this incredibly exciting journey of partnership between the park and the school. Thank you so much for listening to me today. The creation of this WEP has been an amazing experience involving the whole community of staff, pupils, friends and neighbours. The future is challenging, but also extremely exciting as we work together, Lancing College and the South Downs National Park. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mark, and really helpful in terms of the wider picture and the context within which the college is operating. I should just remind members, whilst it was quite right and proper that Mark drew attention to the planning application, the inclusion of a development proposal within a WEP does not guarantee planning permission will be granted. That's in our paper. And just to make that clear, so it's not our job today to consider that matter. What is important for us is to make sure that the whole estate plan is working in the way that we anticipate and hope, and that it does link very clearly to our objectives and duty. I'd be grateful for your comments and questions. Yes, Arthur.
Thank you, Chair. It's great to read the WEP and see how nicely it fits with the Partnership Management Plan. In particular, I'm looking at page 28 of the WEP, Aim 5, Objective 9, to reach out to our neighbours and invite people in. And Mark, you've spoken about some of the challenges that the college is facing. What actions can be taken to overcome the challenges of inviting neighbours in and making Hogwarts on the Hill seem slightly more welcoming to those who are maybe not sharing the Christian faith or don't have income for education and might be intimidated by the surroundings. Thank you.
Thank you.
So actually we have done an impact report, which I can send over if you'd like. But I think Lancing College is intimidating, isn't it? The sort of, when you don't know it, the sort of flinty, rather austere buildings. But anyone who visits is immediately surprised by the warmth and integrity when you are there. We do a lot with the local community already. I think we're seen as a lot less snooty than perhaps we have been in the past. The chapel is, of course, open to the public every day, apart from Christmas Day, I think. And we do lots of carol services that are open to the public. We do lots of visits, particularly from SEN schools up to our farm. We have lots of people using our pitches. We have lots of people coming up and doing swimming lessons and swimming clubs. We have lots of local state-maintained schools using our swimming pool. So we do a lot already, but there's always more to do.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Any other questions? Jerry, then Vanessa.
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of going on from that, Mark, really, and I think it's a really well-produced document and a fascinating read. I just wonder that when we went down to the college some months back, it's clear that it's not just the chapel. You've got some really interesting buildings there that clearly during term time you can't open up to a more general audience. I just wonder if perhaps outside term time you might not be able to do more to welcome Joe Public in to see the great cultural heritage you have in addition to the chapel that's obvious in many ways, but some other parts of the school are equally worthy of exploration. Has any thought gone into that?
Thank you, Jerry. Well, essentially most of the time we have children on site, even in the holidays. So, for instance, during the at the end of the summer term, for instance, we have our leavers due on the Saturday, and on the Sunday, our lettings customers turn up and are there for 7 weeks. And we, in fact, have more kids staying there during the summer holidays as boarders than we do in the term time. We also, for instance, in the Easter holidays, have a group from Central and South America coming over for 12 days. So we have these safeguarding obligations that we have to do. We used to, what was really nice a while ago, but they don't do it anymore because they weren't happy with the parking, was that we used to have that craft fair there, didn't we? That I loved, but our parking is a bit substandard, and particularly when it's wet and we have to use the horse field, which we're allowed to do for 10 days a year, by the way. They were concerned about that, so we don't have that anymore. But it'd be fun. I'd love to give some tours. So we can think about that. Yeah.
Thank you.
But safeguarding, I'm afraid, is quite key.
Absolutely. Yeah, Vanessa.
Sorry, Mark. Yeah, that sort of answers my question, which was very similar to Jerry's, but in terms of access for the public, in terms of, footpaths through. But obviously, I know you mentioned in the WEP, the safeguarding issue, and I was just thinking about term time, but you've sort of answered my question, that you're busy all the time.
Yeah. It's really hard. So, in fact, the inspectors, we get inspected sort of every 3 years. We're even sort of chuntering a little bit about letting people come out to the chapel, and for us that's not negotiable. So we have to explain how we safeguard and how we've got a whole security culture there. So it is very hot that we need this safeguarding thing, but we haven't got kids the entire time, but pretty much the entire time. But we do, there's a lot of people come up to the school, but I get what you're saying, that it's mainly to see the chapel. I do get that, but we can have a think about how else we do it.
Thank you, thanks. I've got Tom, then Mark, and then Stephen.
Good morning. And thank you for the plan and your presentation, which it's a very comprehensive and interesting plan, and has many great features to it. But just continuing this theme perhaps about the context of where the estate exists. It's very close to, literally adjoins the south coast conurbation, and we know there's development going along all of the south coast, and just over the road from you at Shoreham Airport was just an example of that. And just thinking about this, is the college has existed for decades and potentially centuries ahead, and we're sat here thinking about things in a very immediate short term. But the county councils are going through a devolution process. The political landscape is changing around us, and I know that you're obviously focused on managing the business of the school and your immediate priorities. But it seems to me that this development pressure and political cycle is only going to get more complex as we go forward. Although it's great that you're here today and there's been a visit to the site, I wonder, given you probably obviously limited capacity to engage with the council, with politicians and so on, and change over time, how best do you see the relationship between this organisation and the people around this table, and supporting your aims, but also supporting the aims of the local community as they change over time? Because I think there's probably threats and opportunities in that regard.
Sorry. Oh, that's a difficult question, isn't it? And actually, this is what I've been talking to Nick about. What I'd like to clarify going forward is, and what I mentioned in my talk, how we can work together as a more, human to human aspect, and we're going to go away and have a think about that. But what I'd really like is a relationship where governors, a couple of my governors, for instance, maybe the headmaster, me, can talk to members of this committee, members of the planning committee, executive officers of the park, and just talk really openly about the challenges we're facing and what we really need to do. Because I sometimes worry that when projects come to the park, that it's looked at as a project, but really I want to get across that we're only doing that project to protect the whole organisation, which we see schools going bankrupt every week at the moment, don't we? And I like to think that you want us there looking after this place. So I really want to work out a forum where we can have a better relationship, rather than you just receiving a letter from us going, please can we do this? I'd like to talk it through. Gosh, the community question and what happens with local politics and stuff, I think is above my pay grade, really. It is complicated, isn't it?
It is, and it's everyone here has got a network behind them. Some are here because they are representing their local councils, others appointed by government or directly appointed by the authority. But I think it's sort of incumbent on us to work out how we can make these partnerships work. So, for example, I know Paul Brewer, who's the Environment Director at Ada Council, has great ambitions for the Ada Valley in terms of ecosystem services. And people around here will have a lot of expertise, and you're sitting next to one of them at the moment. But I'm just interested in how we can all work together as a team to help you achieve your objectives, but seeing the estate as part of the wider landscape and also part of the wider region, an economic and environmental region. That's music to my ears.
Thanks, Tom. Mark.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much, Mark, for an excellent presentation and the plan. I had a series of questions I was going to ask. I'll focus it in, but the first thing I wanted to say was just to laud the contribution to the local economy, £20 million, which I'm sure makes a huge contribution and benefit to your local economy. Curious about, the growth agenda and how that can be increased further over time to support the growth economically, locally to the school. But I was actually going to ask a question really, and ask you to say a bit more about the plans around biodiversity and sustainable land management and what your views are on that, and obviously developing those plans over time across the estate. Thank you.
Well, we have been doing lots. And I think as part of our planning application we did relating to the fourth arm, there is a very good ecological addendum there, which I've actually updated recently. But we do lots of tree planting and stuff. So we've planted 21,000 trees. We plant around 2,000 trees a year. The species-rich grassland that I referred to was required, to be brutal by the planning application for the fourth arm. But we're managing that. I see us going more down that route. The trouble is, the goalposts keep moving, don't they, as far as government policy is concerned. Every day. I think in the last few days they've said they don't really like grass and they like woods, and they want us to carry on growing food. So, we've got to work out what everyone wants. But I think as part of this plan, and I mentioned it, the route to net zero is not going to be easy for us. Our buildings are, there's only so much, you could throw 30 million quid at our buildings and not make them much more draft proof. So we're going to need, ground source heat pumps. We're lucky enough, we think, that we're on the aquifer, which means that we can use open source ground source heat pumps. We are going to need to produce some of our own electricity, and otherwise there's no chance we're ever going to fund the loans required for that. So I understand that you're not necessarily going to like what we're going to have to do. So I see the rest of our land, anything that's not being used for exactly what you want it to be used for. Because we're going to have to pay for it, aren't we, to you. But I think there are going to be some things you don't like that we have to do. And so I want to make you like a lot of stuff we do as well.
Thanks, Mark. Helpful. I've got Stephen, then Tim.
Thanks, Mark. That was an excellent presentation, and it's a great read. I really enjoyed it, and I hope it delivers, what you want it to. I've got a question. You mentioned in your presentation about the whole school community being involved, including students. And I notice in your strengths, you've mentioned as a pool of students to generate and engage with sustainability initiatives. Do you have any examples of how the students will have done that?
Yes, so we have a green group where this was discussed, so we got some good ideas from that. A lot of the photographs in here are taken by children. There's one from my daughter, actually, in there, of the icy tunnel through the woods. And so we held a photographic competition to get them out, taking photographs, appreciating nature. A lot of our kids, we have the college farm, so we have the wider farm, which is essentially out of bounds. But right in the centre of the site, we have what's called the College Farm Project. A lot of our children use that as it's a sport. Not all kids like playing sports, so that's a really good way of getting them introduced to nature. We've got our equestrian centre, of course, where kids can go down and look at animal husbandry, that sort of thing. It was spoken about, in headmasters' assemblies. It'll carry on. We realise that so I said our sports facilities are subpar at the moment, but what do we have that's unique is our land and our space and our room to breathe and nature, which our local competitors don't have. So we're very focused on thinking, how can we bring that more into what we do with the kids going forward?
Yeah, thank you very much. Mark, on that point, if I can just build before I bring in Tim's question, I noticed that the college ran a sustainability week a few years ago now, which was really successful, and we heard quite a bit about that. Looking at your action plan, there's all sorts of ways in which the curriculum could reform and shape to support your 5 key projects. And I find it quite exciting, the opportunities, particularly around enterprise, because young people now are going out into a world where they need enterprise skills, whether they're working on their own or in an organisation. And to be able to use your plan to help enrich their curriculum would be really, really exciting, I think.
Yes, thanks, Melanie. I would agree with that, and I think we're just at the beginning of this, really. So we do lots of stuff with the kids and the land, etc. But incorporating it into the curriculum is at a fledgling state. But it is exciting. I agree. Yeah.
Thank you, Tim.
Mine is not a question addressed to our esteemed guests, but I think we need to have debate as well as clarification, and I just wanted to express a view, which therefore is addressed more to my colleagues on this committee. I did express some scepticism at the visit we had in, I think November 2023. I think the plan has a very clear descriptive account of the setting of the school and the land and what it's used for and so on. I did find, however, as I read through, that one thing I was missing was the clarity about targets, achievements, timescales, change, and so on. Now, I do understand the predicament that the college and indeed doubtless other independent schools are in. And just to show I have absolutely no prejudice in the matter myself, I sent one of my children to an independent and another to a state school, and both did equally well. So that's not entering into my views at all. But I do think, as an organisation which itself is facing resource issues of an acute kind, all of us are a bit nervous as we await our settlement for the government, but we really do need to focus our resources on delivery so that we can demonstrate that we are achieving our purposes. And in terms of delivering our purposes through this whole estate plan, I certainly understand that the components of the ecosystem services and other things that we would wish to see addressed have been tabulated, and ways in which those could be advanced and so on have been set out. But I was left in a state of some uncertainty as to what the prospects of achievement actually were, and that's not to blame anybody. A task can be difficult, and therefore nobody can be blamed for failing to produce a timely delivery. But when I got to the end, I think I did rather feel that something that was echoing what was in my mind, that some readers may feel that the aims and objectives and action plan arising from them is a little too focused on the core purpose of education and so on. Absolutely, education is vital and important, but in terms of contribution to our purposes, deliverably and within timescales which we could monitor and so on, I was left with a bit of an open mind. Anyway, I won't say any more. That is simply my take on this proposal.
Thank you, Tim. Would anyone like to say anything that would help illuminate things for Tim or give a view? Vanessa.
I mean, it's not a complete sort of answering Tim, but just my thoughts as well. Are we on to thoughts now?
We can be, absolutely.
Because it is really interesting that it's 10 years since the first WEPs were done. That's quite a good point to kind of reflect on all the changes that have happened in legislation and things like that, and what we're asking our partners to deliver for us. And it's really made me think about, and Mark really explaining the business and the challenges. And I think this is the first school, second school. What was the first? Okay. But it's really made me think about like what we're asking of the land to do in the southeast, and actually where this is going and how hard all these things have to work. And we need businesses to survive. I mean, Mark mentioned about like the ripples out in the kind of local communities, really, really important. And that these spaces, we're looking at, this move to like multifunctional landscapes. They have to work really hard and do all these things. So I'm really pleased that, thank you, Mark, and everybody that's involved in it, because these things are not easy. They cost money to make. There's a lot of time with everything else that's going on. So thank you for all that work's going into it. But it's really interesting to see that you've really all of you really understood what we're looking for and what we're expecting, but for us as well to understand what you've got to deliver and what we need, because, to keep those buildings there, they need to be, you use them or lose them and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just reflecting on, because I had, my initial thing that Tim was I was initially just thinking, well, why are we getting, it seems quite a small WEP in terms of the other things that we look at, but actually it is kind of like interesting to see that real business and the land and everything that we've got to get our heads round. And I think it's really important that we want these thriving communities. We need things to thrive. We need businesses to thrive. We need people in employment. We need all this stuff going. So it's a real learning curve. And I just think sort of this WEP, as well as all the other ones that we've done, to take all the learning that we've done from that, talking to members now and the team, is like how we move these on for the next 10 years and what they should develop into. Because actually I think
sorry, the landscape has slightly sort of changed, and I think we could kind of morph these on a bit. Maybe have different tiers of like how we do this. But it is like, we want the outcomes. People need to, businesses and farms and things need to thrive. And yeah, this thing about, and the journey to net zero, it's not going to be, it's not easy. And all the things that you want to do and try and, I mean, it's hard. And even when we know, like, just in my own experience of putting lots of solar panels on a heritage building, you only get the sunlight in the summer, and the rest of the year you're scrabbling around, where can I get that energy from? But I really, really appreciate that all the work that you've done to go into this whole estate plan, because there's lots of learning that we will take from it, and I'm really listening to what you're saying about the pressures and how we kind of use that in a different way. I think there's something that we need to really think about to help people, especially when you think about, like, every planning application we're asking for a BNG percentage, and that's like, if you have then lots and lots of planning applications, you're suddenly attacking on new projects all the time, whereas should there be a master plan? I don't know, I'm thinking out loud. So but this is great, Mark. Thank you so much.
Can I say something, Melanie?
Yes, of course.
I think I said that we're going to be involved in the local plan, and we've instructed Rural Solutions to work with you on that. And I think what James Ellis was suggesting was, and it's happened in other parts of the country, is you almost create a local plan for the school. And I don't think that's been done for the South Downs at the moment. And as for it being a small web, we are, I guess, probably by far the smallest estate that's done one. We're only 400 acres, and a lot of those are buildings, and maybe that comes back to Tim's point, which is that, why is this quite focused on education and buildings? Is because we are largely education and buildings. We're lucky enough to have an estate around the edge, and I'm actually, Vanessa, not so worried about giving land credits for doing planning, but what I really want to get across is that every single project we're doing it for a reason, and we're just trying to keep this organisation afloat in an incredibly challenging time, and that enables us to look after the buildings and the land.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Mark, is this a related point? Because I've got Kat waiting. Okay, yes.
Sorry, just to sort of build on what Vanessa was saying, and it's really resonates with my thoughts earlier on about the economic benefits to the local community. The government's agenda is growth, and thinking about how we align the importance of protecting the environment whilst enabling sensible and planned and well measured and well thought through growth. There's up to 400 jobs supported locally at the school. And we should welcome that, and we should be asking how can it be 450 or 500 jobs locally, and the contribution to the local economy is not 20, how could it be 25 million? And it's fantastic that organisations like this are coming forward and want to share that with us. So just to sort of, really nod to that, and it's really important. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, so I think there was a bit of confusion there. The 300 and something that Nick mentioned is probably the college on its own. We also have 2 prep schools and the nursery. So we're up to 450 staff. And that isn't all teachers waltzing around with mortarboards on. It's every different domestic assistants, catering, grounds people, it's the most diverse community that we're looking after here.
Yeah, thank you. Kat.
Thank you. Slightly different point. I was struck when reading your WEP how I think admirable and ambitious your renewable energy generation and plans to kind of change the heating system and everything were. Because having walked around the college, I was struck by how old the buildings were and how difficult it's going to be. And I think, given that we have our aims to be carbon neutral within the park, we probably need to take note of these ambitions and not only learn from how they instigate them, but also perhaps take quite a flexible approach to when they are seeking permission to change things. You know, as a kind of nation, we need to think, we can't think, right, that building looks like that, it's always got to look like that because we want to preserve it, because actually we're in a climate crisis, and I think we perhaps need to, you know, maybe use you as a starting point to maybe change our thinking, because we can't sit here and approve this and say, great idea on one hand, and then, you know, in a couple of years' time when you ask with help with something, we'll be like, no, because this is the rule, because that, I think we need to be a bit more forward thinking about these things to support like climate action. I just wanted to raise that, not only to congratulate your ambition, but also to sort of flag to the authority. I think we need a change of approach as well.
Thank you. That's me. I mean, that is music to my ears. Actually, the buildings we can only do so much with. So we've had 2 sets of consultants, one looking at the land and one looking at the buildings, and they're essentially saying the buildings are too much of a basket case, and therefore we are going to need a lot of electricity in the electrification thing. And as I say, we're lucky enough to be on an aquifer, which means hopefully that open loop ground source heat pumps. So I don't think your problem is going to be with us going, we want to put horrible windows in everywhere. I think your problem is going to be with solar panels. And we need them. And so that's why I'm saying it's not that it's going to be the nasty aspect, although, you know, you can graze and what have you, solar panels. But that's why I'm aware that anything that we don't use, which will be significant, is doing exactly what you do want.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mark. And this is something that actually has come up in one discussion I heard around our new partnership management plan, and something that members have been talking about in terms of buildings that are listed and or precious for other reasons, and how can we actively look at ways in which they can be transformed to be fit for the future, without losing the beauty and the impact that they have as iconic and special places. And I know the planning team are completely in tune with this as well. It's just finding a way through rather complex web of legislation that's built up and accreted over the years. So thank you for that, and thank you, Kat. Any other comments or questions? Well, can I just say, I haven't heard anyone expressing concerns about the WEP, other than Tim questioning in terms of detail of timescales and precision in terms of actions. To be honest, I have a slightly more sympathetic view of it, which is some of these things you won't know exactly how you're going to tackle them until you've got to the next stage. So it's a bit difficult to have that level of precision. And also, clearly, this is a very different estate because the core business is education, and that is top priority for you to make sure that the students get an excellent education and that the school survives. So we're having to turn our minds to a different model, as Vanessa has said. I mean, in the light of that then, colleagues, can I ask, please, for your hands to signal whether you're happy to approve this WEP? Those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Anyone abstaining? Thank you, Tim. Anyone against? No. Okay, thank you very much. I can say that this committee has now endorsed the Lancing College whole estate plan. And thank you very much, Mark, and thank you, Nick, as well, for the work that you and Mark and other colleagues have put into this.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Welcome, Anne. You seem a long way away. That's all right.
Yeah, I am
Stay
rather,
there.
aren't I? But
Yeah. That's it. No, it's fine.
No, I'm fine
honestly. That's fine. Colleagues, we have before us the draft corporate plan 25/6. Just to highlight that this is a bridging plan between, if you like, old PMP and our contribution as an authority and the new PMP that is evolving as we speak. So please do bear that in mind. There's an element of practicality about this, as well as obviously relevance and importance. So over to Anne.
thank you very much, Chair. And you've already said some of what I was going to say, so that's
Sorry.
excellent. So as Melanie says, we took the decision in 2020 to do 5-year corporate plans. We're coming to the end of the current management plan at the end of this year, so we need something to bridge us as we come into April. So what we're proposing is a 1-year plan. What we've done, therefore, is really a kind of light refresh. So rather than go for anything wholesale at this stage, we've gone for a look at some of the measures and the targets, and we've refreshed and had to think about some of them. And that's been based on delivery to date. So we've looked at what we've actually delivered to date, and that's what we've used to adjust the measures that we've put in. And we've also taken the opportunity to align where we can with the incoming protected landscapes targets and outcomes framework. So you'll all be aware that as part of the management plan process, we have new kind of government targets that we have to incorporate into management plans. Where possible, we've tried to preempt those in this iteration of the corporate plan where it's been sensible to do so. There's quite a lot of detail in Appendix 2, which sets out what all the changes were. I don't propose to go through these in any detail, but really this was more just to give you a sense of what's changed. So I know some people like to understand what's changed and why it's changed. So that's why I put the tables together, and Richard has put them very helpfully into a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you, Richard, because I know when I printed the table out, it came out very small. But this just tells you really where it links to a protected landscapes and outcomes targets framework, what we've changed, why we've changed it, and crucially what we're not changing. So most of the changes are around higher level targets 6 to 8. We're not changing much around nature recovery and climate at the moment. That's also partly because we're waiting for government guidance on 30 by 30 targets and local nature recovery strategy targets and a bunch of other targets to come in. So we didn't really see much point in changing any of those at the moment because we know that we're going to have to change them later, and we'll bring it into line with the protected landscapes targets as well. We've made more changes to higher level targets 6 and 8. Those are the people in engagement ones mainly. So we have had a look, and we realised that we either under or overestimated what we thought we were going to deliver. So we have adjusted accordingly. We've also taken the opportunity to just change a few and tweak the wording. We've made some changes to Corporate Plan Priority 3 around income generation, had quite an extensive conversation with James Winkworth, our income generation manager, around what these should look like, and we've agreed a kind of consolidation of those. And similarly with CP7, which is some of our South Downs and business type measures, again, in discussion, we've streamlined, amalgamated, and just made them a bit more sensible. And finally, CP9, which was our kind of EDI measure, we've taken the opportunity to introduce 2 different measures there. I think, as I've said to you in the past, measurement of EDI forms for projects is kind of a bit pointless because it's a measure of process anyway. And it was a requirement, so we would always have 100%, so it wasn't much of a target really. So what we are talking about now is thinking about the profile of staff and members. So we are going to be thinking about how to establish a baseline. And then another introduction is specifically something which has come from the Protected Landscapes Outcomes Targets framework, which is having policies in place to make sure that we're taking positive action to widen diversity of staff, boards and volunteers. We have a number of policies around those matters. And so what we're proposing to do is not necessarily set a target because we've already got the policies, but we will make sure that they're reviewed within the schedule that they're supposed to be reviewed in. So that's a kind of run through very quickly of what's changed in why. And at Appendix 1, you've got kind of what you might call a clean copy of the revised corporate plan. I would say for the eagle-eyed of you, you will notice that the graphics do refer to the previous targets. I wasn't going to change them for this version of the plan because I wanted to get your approval of what the new measures are before I got the graphic designer engaged and doing work that costs us money. So just be assured that should you agree all of these changes today, we will of course update the graphics in time for the version that goes to the NPA at the end of March. So you're being asked today to recommend the revised bridge year corporate plan to the NPA in March. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Anne. Okay, colleagues, any questions or observations on the draft plan? Vanessa?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Anne. There's a couple of questions. Just on National Park for All, I just want to double check that are we measuring like our school trips with kids in where does that get measured then? In the HLT 6 is that? And then so I just want to and the stuff that we're doing with like charities, you know, the stuff that amazing stuff that the team's doing with like Mind and those other charities. And then my other question or just query was just on the where are we? Sorry, I think it's HLT 8. So on here we've got on our newsletters, e-newsletters is to achieve 14,000, but you had 12,000 on that, so I'm just double checking which one it is. And then just to ask the question, and I don't know what the answer is like, when you're measuring social media audience, is it better to, when you're growing those figures, is it just people who are followers, or is it better to measure engagement? I'm just asking that question. Thanks.
So, thank you, Vanessa. It may be that, Anne, you can't answer all of these, but things to take away and look at.
Yeah, so the school visits and things are covered in HLT 6, and we report on those separately anyway. So you do receive sort of separate reports on the school visits specifically. I think HLT 8, we want to achieve 14,000 subscribers, so yeah, that's the right figure. And in terms of audience engagement, yeah, it's people following really, rather than just all the click-throughs, I think. But I can double check that.
I've got Stephen next, then Mark and Tom.
Hi, Anne. I've got a question regarding CP1. We talk a lot about parish councils and local communities having SIL funds and they're sitting around for a long time. Is there any measure we can put in that in the short term to encourage us to push that a bit harder? Because we're talking about distribution and that's great. You know, we're giving people this money, but they're not spending it.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, good plan. I like that. One to think about.
Yeah, we can certainly make an adjustment. I mean, I guess my question is, what would we put in as a measure for this year? Or do we save it for the next iteration of the corporate plan, which we will be starting to produce sort of September, October time this year?
We rely on your judgment for that, yeah. Right.
Thank you. Mark, next.
It's just a comment around metrics, communications and metrics, sorry. Just to sort of go back to Vanessa's point. It's not a great proxy in measuring growth in followers. You can farm followers. I'm not saying we're doing that, by the way, but they can also be bought through social media campaigns, paid for campaigns. Far more effective tools are engagement, because then you know that your audience is actually paying attention and doing something with the information you're sharing. And there's a range of metrics you can use to kind of drill down into engagement by audience, by channel. So I would just, yes, it is always interesting. I mean, it's my professional background. I'm always curious as to what size my audience is. I'm more curious as to what we're doing with them and how they're responding to the work that we're doing. Thank you.
If they're passive or active, as it were.
Yeah, thank you. And it varies across channel, you know, so it is complex, and perhaps this isn't the right place for it, because you can really drill down to a lot of data points by different channels. But I would just say that it's not a great proxy. It's just measuring followers. Yeah.
Yeah, just to respond specifically on that, I kind of agree with you, but it's a question of how much we change now and how much we just wait for the new plan. I think, yeah. No, which is really very helpful. So I appreciate it. It's immensely helpful to get your thinking, because I think we want to improve this for the next time round. I mean, it will be a 5-year corporate plan, so we need to get those mechanisms right.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry,
and it would just,
again.
and just on the same point, it would be the same for media coverage, you know, so rather than number of pieces of earned media, it's what's clip favourability, for example. You know, that's a really interesting metric to track over time. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, it would be interesting perhaps when Ruth does come to talk to us about the comms plan, to look at the metrics she's using in terms of managing the whole service, because not all of that will be up in the top level. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Tom.
Thank you. It's just a question of clarification. Perhaps I'm not reading the tables and I haven't got good enough glasses or something, but on page 136, we've got CP3 and CP4 income generation targets. CP 3.1, 3.5 million for 25-26, and CP 4.2, 250,000, which suggests therefore an overall target of 3.75 million. But on page 143, and this is where the print is very dense, there are changes proposed whereby the language around CP3 would be modified, and then the income target for CP4 has been struck through, but measured to be removed and incorporated into CP 3.1 to simplify reporting. But if you do that and the target's only 3.5 million, 250k has gone somewhere. I don't know if it's the way it's expressed differently between the two tables, but my question is, have I got that right or wrong? The second one is, what's the rationale? I mean, if I was looking through the glass darkly, does that mean that we've got less confidence in the original new income generating pilots, for example, LA Consultancy linked to Green Finance and WEPs, and we're putting all our eggs in one basket? And if that is the rationale, then I can understand that. But I just want to be clear.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
Can you do your, Tom?
Apologies.
Yeah, no, thanks, that's really helpful. So I had quite extensive discussions with James about what these should look like. My understanding is that, but I can go back and check, that the 250 is very specifically around core costs. I don't think it's necessarily an additional, I think it's a part of the 3.5. And what we were aiming at with the changes we've made here is what we were measuring before was a series of very specific mechanisms. So what we've decided to do is try and make it a little bit broader so that we capture the overall figure and then list what the different mechanisms are, because rather than have targets that relate specifically to specific mechanisms, because it's always quite challenging to then meet those, have an overall target and then just report on which of the mechanisms delivered which one. So I think that was the thinking around that.
I completely understand that when you're testing new ways of doing things and you can't know in advance how that's going to work out. But I'm therefore right in thinking that it always was a 3.5 million target, of which the 250 was a subset. So it's not a decrease from, okay. And as long as what I'd be really interested in is understanding how officers are interpreting the success or otherwise, and what they've learned from trying to do things differently, because things will work out one way or the other for lots of different reasons. What's more important is, have we learned from it, and what are we doing to improve ongoing performance or look at new areas? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Just in reading the detail, it does look as if that target of 3.5 million is an increase on last year, definitely. And then the 250 is trying to have money that helps towards our core costs, because the majority of our 3.5 million, or whatever the big figure is only allowed to be used on non-core costs, which is our big challenge, obviously, because we need officers to manage and support the projects. So, yeah, thank you for that. That's really helpful. Tim.
Thank you. I want to talk about Appendix 1, and I think my points are really about people and access for all, because I thoroughly support the existing targets, and we've also talked about digital engagement, but there are an awful lot of people out there who could very easily get to the national park if they chose to do so, but somehow we're not managing to attract them. And to revert to something which I discussed with Anne quite some time ago, it leads me to the question of what is the offer of the national park? What is it that we are putting out there for people? I think there's a bit of a tendency to assume the national park is marvellous. The only things that are stopping people coming here because they can't make it or don't have the time or public transport or something like that. And that is, of course, those are barriers for some, but they're not barriers for everybody. And so, yes, we've got the digital engagement of 100,000 people, and we've already discussed that. And maybe this is a flagging point. I think it probably is for the corporate for the partnership management plan rather than for this interim corporate plan. But I personally would like to see more of a strategy directed at the world, at the general public, and bringing them, because quite apart from anything else, if we don't have their support, if we don't have their engagement, then we're not going to survive, and there won't be the stakeholders in our enterprise which will persuade the politicians to keep us in funds. So I just mentioned that. But moving on to something more proper to this document, if I could turn up the page I was looking at with the diagrams on it. Well, they seem to have disappeared. It was the one with the coloured
was that the high-level targets?
Images. Here they are. Yes, thank you.
Right.
We've got placemaking, generating income, economy, about an authority process, which does, of course, include EDI, and so it should. But somehow I was missing National Park for All on this page. Where's the people?
It's on 14.
It's on?
Oh, sorry, page 138 of our pack.
Right.
Just above that.
Okay. 14. Sorry, I'm working off a loose copy of the...
Yes,
14.
Sorry, 14 of this
Yes,
report.
That's right.
Yeah.
Other way, sorry. I beg your pardon. Yeah. I never was any good with this kind of thing. Yes, I did look at that. Can you direct me as to... can I be directed, should I say, as to quite where we've... I see. It's on its side. National Park for All. Yes. Okay. Yes. Good. I will study those with care. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. But whilst we're looking at the high-level targets, I mean, having looked at our plans for a number of years now, when I've been with the authority, it did strike me that we don't have many measures of the work of our planning team. We do. Obviously, the planning team contribute to a lot of the nature recovery figures, to the climate action through their advice notes and so on. But it did strike me whether for the future, again, this is a flag, we should be looking at some of the measures that are about planning performance, because we hear time and again that the park is often, if people are unhappy with the park, they say, oh, it's because of the planning. Now, people never like planning, wherever it is, whether it's in or outside of a park. I hesitate, I'm very clear about that. But I do feel that it would be helpful to give some visibility to the work that our planners do. And I know this committee receives the performance report annually, which does share and celebrate how well the team does. So it would be quite nice to see some measures that are clearly about the planning service, because that's an important part of our delivery in the corporate plan. So again, kind of one for the future and not for this one. Okay. Any other comments or questions on this? Okay. Well, can I ask the committee then? We will be recommending this to the National Park Authority in March. And can I ask you... Oh, sorry.
Given there were some comments on things for officers to consider.
Oh, okay.
Can I just suggest that that's included on recommendation two?
Right. Okay. Thank you. Just been advised. We'll take recommendation 1 first of all. So receive the draft corporate plan. We've all received it. Thank you very much. And 2, can we say recommend the approval of the corporate plan 25-26 to the National Park Authority in March 25, subject to consideration of the comments of the committee. So the plan will go forward with our comments in it, such as they were, and that will go to the NPA. So all those in favour of amended recommendation 2. Thank you very much. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Anne. Thanks for your work on that and continuing work on the PMP as well, which we'll hear about on another occasion, I know. Right, moving on. Nigel's chance to be in the spotlight. Treasury Management Strategy, which is our annual look at the policy statements that underpin your work.
Thanks, Chair. So, yeah, as you know, this Treasury Management Strategy sits alongside a capital strategy that also comes to the March NPA along with the budget. So this is looking at the Treasury side of things, which can involve borrowing or investment, whereas the capital strategy is looking at your capital investment approach. So I think under the committee delegations, this has to come here, and you have to recommend it to the NPA, as opposed to the capital strategy, which goes directly to the NPA. So this strategy determines how you expect to manage your cash flows, and it sets out, as I say, both an investment and a borrowing strategy. I think the key aspect of those is about transparency, so that people who are interested in your activities understand what is your risk appetite and how are you planning to use or safeguard public money, particularly when you have surpluses and you're investing it. In essence, there's no proposed changes to the strategy here. And it maintains your current risk appetite, which is, as a publicly funded authority, primarily around security and liquidity, making sure that anything that is invested is secure and you're likely to receive it back, and that you also have access to cash when you need it to conduct business of the authority. So in terms of the borrowing side of it, I mean, it is included in the strategy, but as we know, what has been happening is that the authority has been internally borrowing because you have high cash balances, and that's really useful because that helps you to avoid unnecessary borrowing costs. And so that will continue to be the strategy so long as you have sufficient liquidity and cash available to you to do that. The report shows that there's expected investments next year of about 411,000. And again, I think that is clearly well manageable within the cash balances you have available, so you shouldn't have a need to borrow. It does include some sort of fairly complicated graphs and other things that we're required to put in under the Prudential Code, but they really are related to when you are borrowing to meet your capital financing requirement, but as we've said, that's not really applicable to you at the moment. In terms of excuse me, investments, there's no proposed change around that. So the strategy is setting out that you secure, or you provide assurance around security because you invest with high-rated or high credit-rated institutions, also that you have time-limited investments, so we're talking about 6 to 12-month investments here, and we limit the amount that can be invested with any one counterparty, so between 2 and 10 million, depending on their status. One aspect of this strategy that will remain in place is that if we're not able to find good quality, highly secure products with reasonable rates for you, then the strategy is that investment goes into Brighton and Hove City Council, because you then benefit from a pool rate of a larger authority that's able to access wider investment instruments. At the moment, there's not so much invested in Brighton and Hove because interest rates are high. There are good products in the market. But in the past, we have had nearly all of your cash invested in Brighton and Hove City Council because that was advantageous to you. So I'll leave it there. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Thank you. Just two things that I wanted to point out to colleagues. On the covering paper, paragraph 3.13, the benefits, as Nigel said, of investing in Brighton and Hove City Council are clear and do allow us to have ready access to the funding that we need. And also to sort of counter any concerns, there is access to independent advice other than from Brighton and Hove City Council. So whilst they're providing us with the financial services, it's not completely tied up. So I think we can be assured that there is that separation. And the second thing is to say, on page 161, I was really pleased to see our ethical investment statement clearly stated there in terms of the sorts of institutions that we would work with and what we would encourage them to be doing. So thank you very much for that. Yes, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. You've picked up on the point I was going to raise. Having mentioned where we put our money and making sure it's invested in the kind of things we're all very comfortable with, as opposed to not comfortable with, it's lovely to see this statement in here. I know colleagues elsewhere have raised it before, so yes, a definite plus point tick box there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, Peter. Vanessa, and then Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this report. I just noticed that it mentions in the report that there's regular training given to staff and officials to make sure they understand, keep up to date with Treasury management. I just wanted to flag, I don't know if members could get some training. It's something that since the 5 years that I've been here, we always keep asking for. So,
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you are overdue some training.
Yes.
Yeah, we have just run this for the council, actually, so absolutely, we'll organise that.
Thank you. Your action plan, brilliant. Thank you. Stephen.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, my thanks to Nigel, and likewise my best wishes for the future, and thank you for everything you've done during meetings I've been at. And Chair, I'm just grateful to you for what you've just explained about the relationship with Brighton and Hove, because if like my financial advisor said, invest in me, I might think, well, that's a bit odd. But I'm grateful for you for explaining it's not odd, and that there's independent advice around this, and that the investment in Brighton and Hove really is the best thing, notwithstanding the Treasury management relationship we have with them. So I'm very grateful for you for explaining that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Stephen. Yes, other Stephen.
Nigel, I hope this is not a stupid question, but the MRP statement on page 157, is this what I would call, from my commercial background, is depreciation? So we're looking at depreciating what we pay for assets for, or have I misunderstood that?
Oh, could you, yeah.
It is a form of depreciation, but only where you are borrowing to finance capital, to make sure that you essentially are putting aside sufficient money to repay the debt. But it acts like a form of depreciation, you're quite right.
Okay, colleagues. Oh, yes, Tom.
Thank you. 2 weeks ago, I think it was today, the Deputy Prime Minister announced the Priority Devolution Programme, of which East, West Sussex, Brighton are going to be part. with the ambition, I think, that a mayoralty should be established, or at least elections take place by May 26. Now, that obviously is beyond the year we're talking about here, and it's possible that there would be no change to the governance practices around the Treasury function. That might continue as was, but I wonder how we are able to keep in touch with the governance structure within Brighton Hove as this big change happens, because it potentially could mean that this function morphs, its leadership changes, the governance over it changes, and it's a sort of slightly longer term consideration, but it's going to come around very fast.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is something that we have on the risk register, you'll note, Tom. And I know that there's been quite a lot of work in the senior team about responsibility for keeping abreast of all these things, making the right links at the right point. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add, Nigel, on that, or difficult?
Well, only that this, the services provided to you by Brighton are under contract, and so they're driven by that timeline more than anything else, to be perfectly honest. Not quite, I would probably look to Victoria for when it runs out, but I think it's probably got potentially another 1 to 2 years to run, which might be a perfect timeline. And I mean, Brighton and Hove is a unitary council, so it's not going to disappear. It might change shape, but it might change name, might it? But yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you. I mean, that's an important point, and certainly I was hoping we'd pick it up a bit more under the risk register, just so that we can all be updated on where we are. No, don't feel free to, please, but I just thought that was a good point to do it. Okay, colleagues, then, can I ask you, please, are you happy to approve, to recommend to the MPA that they approve the Treasury Management Strategy? In favour? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, and thank you, Nigel. Right, can I suggest we just have a very quick 5-minute comfort break, stretch legs. Vicky, Nikki, come up and do take your seats. So we'll reconvene at 15:15, literally just a quick few minutes.